All right, so we'll go ahead and dive in now to the briefing regarding the severe threat tomorrow. This is Ryan here at the Weather Service office in Peachtree City. Things have changed a little bit from yesterday, but still the general same thinking as we were briefing you yesterday. So obviously the severe risk is going to increase quickly, primarily tomorrow afternoon, and then running as late as the pre-dawn hours on Monday. At this point, the highest risk for severe weather does appear to be along and south of Interstate 20, and we'll get into the exact setup and risk areas here in just a little bit. And it does look like a couple of different rounds of the development of severe thunderstorms is possible. One potentially in the afternoon running into the evening, and then another one for the nighttime hours tomorrow night into early Monday morning. Still looking at really the gamut of threats there, running from damaging winds, tornadoes, still also looking at the possibility of some stronger or long track tornadoes, specifically in central Georgia, it appears at this point, and I'll get into that a little bit too, as well as pretty widespread heavy rainfall totals, which will lead into a flooding concern, as well as hail, specifically in the afternoon and evening storms tomorrow as well. So let's go ahead and get going. So the SPC outlook for tomorrow for our area is as high as an enhanced risk, and as you can see, that is primarily in central Georgia, and then the slight risk up to the I-20 corridor and a little marginal risk just north of that. So it really looks like the highest risk of more widespread severe thunderstorms tomorrow will be concentrated more into central Georgia, with a risk further to the north gradually tapering off as you head into far north Georgia. So as I mentioned, we're talking as early as tomorrow afternoon and into tomorrow night, and your damaging wind, tornado, and flash flooding and hail threats there as well. We'll jump into those in a little more detail. The damaging wind threat, we're talking pretty high risk level here. You see a 30% severe across central Georgia, as well as a hatched significant severe area there. That indicates the potential for wind gusts 75 miles per hour or higher. We saw some of that hatched area in our forecast area last Sunday as well. So that's really only really put in there when we're looking at a higher risk for some pretty severe wind gusts. And you can see that's concentrated in the western portion of the area at this point, and will depend on what we get going out to the west and pushing into our area. The tornado risk, again, we have a hatched area for central Georgia, really all of central Georgia, and the highest 10% tornado risk there as well. That's a significant tornado risk, and that hatched area does indicate where the strong long track tornadoes would be possible. That would be primarily with the potential development of supercell thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. And still a tornado risk a little further north up towards the I-20 corridor as well. And a lot of this will depend on the placement of the warm front, which I'll get into in just a little bit. Hail risk, that is pretty high across the southwestern portions of the area. You see a 30% severe hail risk there too. That's where we have the highest risk of hail 1 inch in diameter or larger. That hail risk will probably also be maximized with any thunderstorms that we get in the afternoon or evening. And if we get the development of any supercellular thunderstorms, that would provide the risk for some large hail in these areas. As far as timing, it is a little complicated. What we're looking at here is a couple of different possible rounds for strong to severe thunderstorms, and I want to, as we always do, emphasize not to look at the exact time or location. This is just one model solution, and they're showing a little bit different between models, but the same general trend is expected. So an initial round of rain or thunderstorms is possible beginning late morning into midday. I'm not looking at the highest severe risk with that spreading across the area, but then as we get to the early afternoon hours, things will begin to change. That's when the severe risk could begin to develop along and south of a warm front. So that's when we're talking about down in central Georgia up to maybe the southern metro, the potential for additional thunderstorms to develop that would really increase the risk for damaging winds, tornadoes, and hail. And then as we get into tomorrow night, an additional wave of thunderstorms may move into the area from the west, providing an additional damaging wind and perhaps embedded tornado threat as well. So that's the general trend that we're expecting for tomorrow. As I mentioned, the warm front is going to be one source of uncertainty. So the severe weather risk is going to be along and south of that warm front. This is one model solution that you can kind of pretty easily tell where it brings the warm front. So areas along and south of that, that's where we're going to have the instability, the warm temperatures combining with the shear that we have in place, and that's where we would have our highest risks for tornadoes, damaging winds, and hail. And that's really the concern for tomorrow afternoon for those areas that are south of that warm front, that we can get some really severe thunderstorms developing during the afternoon hours across these areas. North of the warm front, the severe risk is going to be a lot lower, but we are still looking at a heavy rainfall, flooding risk even in these areas north of the warm front as well. And that heavy rainfall and flash flooding risk obviously will also exist along and south of the warm front with the severe thunderstorms that we have developed. So it really is a multifaceted event, and the severe risk primarily will depend on exactly where that warm front sets up. As I mentioned, the heavy rainfall flooding threat is one big risk that we're looking at for tomorrow. We are looking at a pretty widespread area of 2 to 3+ inch rainfall totals across areas largely along and south of I-20. And because of that, we do have a moderate risk already out for day 2 excessive rainfall risk for these areas. So that really highlights the potential for flash flooding in these areas. We are planning to issue a flash flood watch this afternoon. We're just honing in on the exact area where we will put that flash flood watch, but I would anticipate obviously the areas that you see the heaviest rainfall and as far north as portions of the Atlanta metro area as well. We could see localized rainfall totals of 5 inches or slightly higher, especially if we get some training thunderstorms through tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night. So even though we are looking at the severe risk as well, we don't want to forget about the potential for any flooding concerns. And then looking a little bit further down the road, obviously, if we get these expected rainfall totals, you would expect some local waterways to react to that. So we already have a few points forecast to go to minor flood, primarily Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, and thereafter in central Georgia, including on the Flint, Okmulgee, and Oconee. And you can always look at these forecasts over the coming days at the link there, but did not want to forget about the hydrology aspect of this. So just to sum up these threat levels that we're looking at, pretty high risk. We're looking well into the enhanced risk category for tomorrow for damaging winds, rainfall, flash flooding, and tornadoes, you can see there, and still a significant risk of large hail as well for tomorrow afternoon, specifically for the large hail threat. So this is not an inconsequential risk for severe thunderstorms that we're looking at for tomorrow. Just to sum that up, increasing severe risk primarily tomorrow afternoon and into tomorrow night. Highest risk along and south of I-20 at this point. As we discussed, it will depend on where that warm front sets up, where the northern boundary of the higher risk of severe weather is. Potential for a couple different rounds, one in the afternoon and evening when we could get some initial perhaps supercell thunderstorms develop along and south of that warm front, and then another wave of damaging winds and perhaps embedded tornadoes possible tomorrow night into early Monday morning. And as you can see, we're looking at all of the risks from damaging winds, tornadoes, heavy rainfall, and hail with these storms. So that's what we are looking at this point. As far as a follow-up briefing or email, at this point we're not scheduling a specific briefing for tomorrow. but I would anticipate that you'll see at least an email, perhaps a recorded video briefing as we did last weekend, tomorrow morning prior to the onset of more of the stronger thunderstorms. So that is what we have for you right now. At this point, I would like to go ahead and